Welcome to episode 4 of the Captain's Vlog, a podcast published by fierceturtle.co.uk and primarily aimed at crew in training for the Clipper Round the World Yacht Race. The podcast is entirely independent of the Clipper race and Clipper Ventures and Clipper Training, and it is really just one person's view, namely me, about various things, experiences I've had of the Clipper race, both as a round the world crew, a temporary skipper on the race, and also I have fairly significant experience in the training department as a freelance training skipper and yachtmaster instructor. So with that said, let's just talk today, I think, about pros and cons again. The pros and cons this time of Leg 6. So Leg 6 largely incorporates the starts on the east coast of Asia, normally fairly high latitude, and in the past has started from Qingdao. I understand that this time it may start further south and then incorporate Qingdao. That's, I say this time, that's as of recording this, which is pre the 2019-20 Clipper Around the World Yacht Race. Of course, all these things change as things change within Clipper and with sponsors and everything else. So Leg 6 is effectively there to take the race eastwards again, from Asia and from China in particular to the next large landmass, which is many thousands of miles east of where you are, and takes you bizarrely into the west, I suppose. So you're going to Western California is the most likely place, or possibly further north than that. So it's the west coast of the States. In the past, San Francisco and Oakland have both been locations for the finish, and also Seattle has been most recently a finish port. So obviously America is a big port in terms of obviously a large and wealthy part of the world, and you're leaving a fantastic departure on the Chinese coast, and then you end up crossing a very barren, hostile ocean in the late winter, early spring, to get you to the warmer climes of the west coast of the States later on in March normally. So as you might expect, because of the high latitude and the fact that it's a large ocean near winter time, it's a fairly challenging environment. It starts off normally very cold, as you've got a very cold continental air mass sitting over you, and then as you get into the sort of the more maritime air, it normally gets a little bit warmer, but it's also very moist, very wet, very, very wintry. So it's not unlikely or unusual to leave Qingdao maybe in sleet or snow and bad visibility. So it's like the UK would be in winter, probably a bit colder. So you need to have the kit, obviously, for that. And then as you go east, you are, in my experience anyway, having done the Leg 6 once, going to experience cold, wet conditions. You're going to see several large weather systems, which will mean high winds, big seas, very fast, exhilarating boat speeds, and it's a long time. It's about 6,000 miles or so, and so even on a fast race boat, that takes a long time to cross that sort of ocean. It's the largest ocean in the world by a very long way. I think the Pacific is something like 5 times larger than the Atlantic Ocean, so it gives you an indication of scale. You won't see a great deal on your way across in terms of other shipping. You're pretty much the nearest human to you as you're crossing the North Pacific is normally said to be the people on the space station. So you're in for a pretty challenging time. Probably going to take you just over 4 weeks to cross, and as I say, you can expect to see some pretty big conditions. So you'll probably see 2 or 3 large weather systems coming through, and wind speeds in the North Pacific. It's very, very similar really to what you'd expect on leg 3 of the Southern Ocean. So you're going to see wind speeds above 50 knots for large parts of the race. Well, not for large parts of the race, that's not true. For 2 or 3 times during the race, you'll see wind speeds probably over 50 knots. You may well see gusts up to sort of 100 knots. Other races have seen those sort of conditions. So if you are looking for that sort of experience out of one leg, then leg 6 is right up there with leg 3. I actually think leg 3 perhaps has slightly more kudos points to those that sail and want to say that they've sailed in the Roaring Forties, but my experience would say that leg 6 was actually the more challenging. I found, I don't know, it was later in the race and therefore perhaps I was a bit more tired as a round the worlder, but I just found leg 6 to be very tough and also hugely rewarding. So out of all of the legs on the race, I would say leg 6 was both the hardest for me and my experience of it, and also the most rewarding and the one I'm proudest of achieving a crossing. We didn't do well in the race. We had some bits and pieces that slowed us down in the race, but in terms of actually experience, I would have said that leg 6 was the hardest and by far the most rewarding of all the legs that I did on the 2011-12 Round the World race. Obviously, in terms of pros and cons, well, you're starting in China, so if you're traveling from a long distance, it's going to be expensive to get there. And you're finishing in America, so if you're from Western Europe, the travel to and from the start and finish is going to be expensive. The pro side to that, I suppose, is that it means you're traveling to some interesting parts of the world that you might not otherwise travel to. So you have China, and obviously China's a very different culture to Western Europe, and so it's nice to visit and see the differences and enjoy the differences, etc. America too is different to Western Europe. It is a culture in its own right, of course, and whilst us English speakers might think that America is very much closer to England than other parts of the world, in my experience anyway, I find that America is very definitely a foreign location for an Englishman. Very pleasant nonetheless, but yeah, worth visiting. So the locations are different but expensive to get to. Making landfall on the west coast of the States after 4 weeks plus at sea in fairly hostile environment is pretty spectacular. We were very glad to see San Francisco at the end of the 2011-12 race, and you have knocked off a large part of the race as a round the worlder when you get to the end of leg 6. That leads me on to another advantage of leg 6 for those that are only doing one leg, and that is that because it's a challenging leg and because it's a long leg and it's tiring and inclement weather and everything else, having fresh crew is a big advantage. It's also a long time to be at sea, and so having new crew that have just new conversation, new faces, that all helps an awful lot. So it might seem like a small thing, but it's not. It's nice to have new energy and new conversation introduced to the boat. And so, again, my experience only, but by the time you get toward the end of leg 6, as a round the world, I was starting to feel, I was 46 when I did it, and I was starting to feel pretty tired, even though I was an awful lot fitter than when I started the race. You know, you've got a few bumps and bruises, and you've been at sea for a large part of the year. It's still just, coming out of winter time. So I found at the end of leg 6, it was nice to have leg 7 to look forward to, which is in large part much warmer and far less challenging in terms of the size of the seas and everything else once you're out of the North Pacific. But also, it was nice to see the sun again. It was nice to have fresh crew, fresh conversations, and beginning the kite up, sailing down the coast of Mexico and what have you was pretty nice, going down to Panama. So leg 6, it is good for, I would say, good for leggers that want to have a challenging leg. It's right up there with leg 3 in that respect. So if you want to see big boat speeds, big weather, the sort of master and commander, perfect storm sort of style of ocean crossing, then leg 6 is definitely up there and worth considering. Sometimes it can be a windier crossing, and other times less windy. Weather is weather, so you're just more likely to get big conditions on leg 6. The other thing, I suppose, is kit. Leg 6, like leg 3, is cold and wet and windy, and so you need good kit. And it's important that I would suggest you need to buy the best boots you can afford. Obviously, Musto HPX boots they've got several different brands. I don't know the brands well, or the different types well, but I know that they sell them with gaiters, and I would say that in terms of boots, you've got to buy boots with gaiters. Obviously, Musto, who are currently the sponsor for the race, have got various offers to crew, so no doubt you will have tried on boots and bits and pieces, so you'll know what you want in that respect. On the 1112, I had a pair of Le Chamoux Neptune boots, which I really rated. They're, I think, quite similar to the Musto rubber boot. They're a rubber neoprene lined boot with a gaiter, and they're very warm and very robust. So, yeah, you pay your money, it takes your choice with that. But the other thing is, leg 6 is one of those legs where you might consider a dry suit, especially if you're going to be on the foredeck. As we've said before in the previous episode, dry suits I see very much as an insurance policy in the unfortunate event that you went over the side and were not clipped on for some reason. So if you're lost from the boat and have to be found and recovered, it can take time. And that time is not on your side in a very cold ocean in winter. So a dry suit is certainly something worth considering, especially if you're going to spend a lot of time on the foredeck. So if you're one of those people that likes to be on the foredeck or spends their time on the foredeck because they are suited to it, then you might think about a dry suit. It's an insurance policy at the end of the day. Make sure you've got plenty of base layers and mid layers, and also make sure that I would definitely, for a cold leg like this, go for the Musto mid-layer salopettes with a fleece lining and mid-layer jacket, which you'd wear over a fleece and then over probably long johns or base layers, wicking base layers, and wear in conjunction either with a dry suit or with your Valley shell, your HPX shell. So make sure you've got plenty of warm kit, a couple of warm hats. Still need your sunglasses because it does get bright. You might want to think about things like a pair of goggles if you're going to be helming a lot, so that you can see when you're surfing down those big waves and you've got sleet, snow, rain, spray in your face. Your eyes get very sore with salt water splashing in your face all the time. So a pair of goggles isn't a bad idea for the faster, colder legs. A balaclava, fleece-lined balaclava. Shark Skin do a great fleece-lined, micro fleece-lined neoprene balaclava with a big neck gasket, and they're about 30 quid. Fierce Turtle sell them. I would definitely recommend one of those for one of these colder legs, leg 3, leg 6. Your hearing goes down, but if you're on the helm for an hour or two in the middle of the night and you're looking forward anyway, having something warm around your head like that makes a big difference, keeps you warmer. Especially if you get waves over the back of the boat, and once your head's cold, you're going to get cold. So good boots, good headgear, good kit all round. Make sure you carry enough changes. Most people on my race on the 1112 had one change of base layers per week, so maximum of maybe 5 weeks of base layers, and change them once a week when you showered, which we normally showered once a week after Mother Watch, but that will vary depending on your skipper and everything else. So make sure you get the kit and take the kit with you. I took a small iPad, which I charged off my own battery pack. Obviously that's adding weight and it's adding more kit to the boat. Generally it's going to be discouraged. I found as around the world it was a nice luxury to carry. Might do another vlog on that. Just that when you got in, you could use your iPad to log into Wi-Fi, and you could book hotels, and you could do banking and all that sort of stuff. And I found on leg 6 in particular, it was nice on the Mother Watch to be able to just retire to your bed, your bunk. We used to get the night off if we had done Mother Watch, so you didn't wake, you had a long sleep through. So on that basis, it meant you got the time to look at something you downloaded beforehand, so a film or a comedy program, and just forget for a while that the boat and the race and everything else. It was just a nice break I found once a week, and I probably only made it 15 minutes into anything I was watching before I was asleep. But it was nice to have that little bit of a, I suppose, that little bit of a comfort blanket, remembering the luxuries and the luxuries of home. Make sure you take plenty of dry bags so that you can decant your clothing and your bits and pieces of kit into dry bags, and then you might want to hang 1 or 2 of those dry bags off your bunk, as long as it's not bothering other people. So you can dip into it for deck kit, things like torches and fleece hats and that sort of stuff. And then have another one which split your base layers, so that you, if you have a disaster and all your base layers get wet, it's only going to be half your base layers because the rest are in another dry bag. So I think that's a good idea too. What else on leg 6 are pros and cons? I mean, I think the big pro has to be that you're going to see some big weather, you're going to see big boat speeds. It's a long race, it's very challenging. It's hugely rewarding when you complete it. Anyone who's done leg 6, I think, you ask them, I think they would say the same. And it's right up there with leg 3 in terms of that sort of sailing challenge. It's very exhilarating. It's very exciting. The downsides: it's cold and wet. It is hard. It's a challenge. If you don't feel you're up to it, then perhaps you ought to be looking at one of the shorter or warmer legs, but they have their own challenges too. It isn't going to be easy sailing a race boat around the world, wherever leg you do. So but if you're going to do one leg and you want a real challenge, I would have said leg 3 and leg 6 are certainly up there as being big challenges, big seas, big waves, big boat speeds, and definitely worth thinking about signing up for. And the other, I suppose, advantage to a lot of these legs now is that you're travelling through some interesting parts of the world, and both the start at China and also the finish in America mean that if you have the time and the inclination and the money, and you've only done one leg, there is always the chance of topping or tailing that race with some travel. And I do know of some people in the past that have finished leg 6, and then leg 7 sets off, and they have driven or hitched or done whatever they're going to do, travelled across America to the East Coast and wherever the start point is for leg 8, which in the past has been New York. And then they've rejoined their race boat for leg 8, so that they've done leg 6 and leg 8 as race crew. And they've also combined within that 4 weeks or so, 4 or 5 weeks of travel, which I think is great if you've got the money and the time to do it. I think that's a fantastic way to, as a legger, to take the most out of the race. Obviously, if you're around the worlder, you're going to be required, so you're going to stay on the boat and go south on leg 7 and do an awful lot of kite work and sailing into warmer climes, and you're going to see your own Panama Canal, things like that, which I'll go on to in the next podcast. So that's 17 minutes, so I'm going to cut it short there. I hope that's of some use to you. I hope it gives you some idea about what you're going to be expecting if you sign up for leg 6. And the next podcast, I'm going to be talking about leg 7, the pros and cons of that. In the meantime, if you have already done this leg and you would like to comment, please download the Anchor FM app. You can send me a comment, which I'm happy to incorporate into a podcast. And alternatively, if you go to YouTube and check out the YouTube channel for Fierce Turtle, you will see that there's a comment section under each podcast where you can put your own comments. If you disagree with me, agree with me, or you have something that I've missed in my ramblings that you'd like to add. So any links in the description below relating to boots and to dry suits, etc. Feel free to click on them. And thanks very much for your support and for listening. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll speak to you again soon. Thanks very much.